Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the July 20th, 2023 meeting of the Baltimore County Planning Board. It is now called to order. I'm Nancy Hafford, the chair of the Planning Board, and I now will start this meeting with the roll call of our board members that are currently present. When you hear your name, please say aye. Mr. Array. Aye. Ms. Brophy. Aye. Ms. German. Aye. Mr. Hafer. Mr. Heckman.
Aye.
Mr. Heinel. Mr. Hinton. Aye. Mr. Halipka. Mr. Johnson. Aye. Mr. McGinnis.
Aye.
Mr. Perlow.
Aye.
Ms. Pinero. Aye. Mr. Warren. Ms. Wolfson. Thank you all. Please join us in saying the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all. Ms. Bensley, are there any changes to the tentative agendas published?
No changes, Madam Chair.
Thank you. In the July 13th, 2023 email, you received draft minutes from the June 15th meeting. Has everyone had an opportunity to look over those minutes? Are there any questions or corrections? If not, may I have a motion to accept the minutes as circulated?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. First on the agenda, we have a presentation from Ms. Shelley Nash, the Deputy Director of the Department of Permits, Approval and Inspection, on the department's policy manual updates. Ms. Nash has finished when she has finished her introduction, I will call for a motion to set a public hearing on this matter. Ms. Nash will deliver a brief presentation on the manual today and more in-depth presentation during the public hearing. Please join me in welcoming Ms. Nash.
Very much. Good afternoon, everyone. Sally Nash. I'm Deputy Director of Permits, Approvals, and Inspections. And today I'm introducing to you the policy manual updates. Next slide. PAI relies heavily on our policy manuals. We had 3 policy manuals that were used a great deal, but the time has come to update them. They range from a time period from 1992 to 2002 from when they were last adopted. So as you can imagine, there are a lot of changes that have happened since that time. We have consolidated 2 of our manuals into one manual. So we took the Development Plan Review Policy Manual and the Development Management Policy Manual and have combined them into one manual for development review. And then we have our zoning policy manual as well. Next slide. Main goals of our project are to make sure that our policy manuals establish clear direction and expectations for the review process, that they bring our current policies into alignment with what we're doing on the ground. They eliminate references to processes that we don't use anymore or to things that have changed in the code. They also provide technical and practical comprehensive approach to the reader to help especially experts, but hopefully anyone get through the development process. And they also include some best practices that we researched and benchmarked and incorporate relevant industry standards where appropriate. Next slide. We started on this project actually a little before last August, so over a year ago. But that's really when we began researching and doing our analysis, looking at other jurisdictions and looking at talking to different departments. September, October, we began drafting the documents. We reviewed them internally with county agencies, especially planning, environmental, and public works. Through January through May, we met with an external policy committee group that helped us make sure it made sense to the outside world. And then here we are with you today. We're hoping to have this adopted by County Council after your blessing by the end of the year. Next slide. So our policy committee group that I mentioned that met January through May consisted of attorneys, developers, engineers, community members, and county council member to get a broad perspective. Our internal agencies that we met with include what is shown on the slide, as I mentioned, planning, EPS, Public Works. We also worked closely with the Office of Law. Next slide. So that is my introduction, and I hope to see you again in September. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Nash. Board members, are there any questions or comments at this?
I continue to hear in our county from citizens, developers, builders, the problems of getting permits to the department. It's not really what you're here for today, but your deputy, you told me, I bring it to your attention. It seems to maybe have gotten a little bit worse, especially for the residents of our county, thinking they can do it online. It's not really working.
So we went online with our permitting system a year and a half ago, and it has not been smooth sailing, but every day we are working on ways to improve the process. The new director of IT has outlined a few steps that are going to be implemented by August 1st that seem like small things, but make a big difference in terms of how we process permits. It's going to save us a lot of time. We're also looking at more long-term options as far as improving the process, because we know that the public is struggling with it. We struggle with it too on a daily basis. You know, we have to call IT and ask for help to get a permit through the process. So we know there is a lot of work to do, and we're working on it.
Never mind how long does it take to get it to the department.
Well, it depends on what kind of permit. I mean, you can get a trade permit in one day.
Now it's more construction kind of thing, fences.
Right.
More of the construction side.
Those take longer. Again, it all depends on the quality of the work that is submitted to us. You know, if we get a good plan, meets all the requirements, it can get through in less than 2 weeks.
Any other questions from the board? If not, may I have a motion?
Okay, so be it moved that a public hearing be set for Thursday, September 7th, 2023 at 5 p.m. regarding the Department of Permits, Approvals, and Inspections Policy Manual updates on the Development Management and Plan Review Policy Manual and the Zoning Policy Manual.
Thank you, Ms. Brophy. Can I have a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Your motion carries.
Okay, thank you.
As a reminder, the public hearing will be in person on September 7th. The board is tentatively
Thank you, Madam Chair. At their July 13th, 2023 meeting, the Landmarks Preservation Commission voted to issue 5 certificates of appropriateness to the following properties: the Towson Jail, the Towson Jail Associates LLC property located at 222 Courthouse Court in Towson, the Bub Nash property located at 14 Chatsworth Avenue in Glendon, the Sandler and Bogat property located at 720 Belfast Road in Sparks, Paradise Place at Sudbrook Assisted Living property located at 600 Sudbrook Road in Sudbrook Park, and the Parkton Hotel Hicks property located at 18848 York Road in Parkton. And that concludes the report.
County Council following our last meeting.
Thank you. Bill 3723, Board Compensation, an act concerning compensation for boards and committees for the purpose of providing for compensation for members of the Planning Board, the Police Accountability Board, the Administrative Charging Committee, and trial boards, and generally relating to compensation for such board and committee members. Bill 4023, West Baltimore West Baltimore County Redevelopment Authority for the purpose of establishing the West Baltimore County Redevelopment Authority, defining terms, establishing membership, requirements, and authority, and generally relating to development, redevelopment, and quasi-public authorities and corporations. West Baltimore County is defined as the geographic area within the boundary line of Liberty Road in the north, Baltimore National Pike in the south, Rolling Road in the west, and the line between Baltimore County and Baltimore City in the east. In this area, there exists a need of residential, commercial, or industrial development or redevelopment in furtherance of the public benefit and interest. In order to revitalize these areas, it is necessary for the county to establish a separate authority whose purpose is to facilitate the development or redevelopment. And that concludes the report.
And welcome to the Baltimore County Planning Board public hearing on the Cycle 41 Water Supply and Sewer Master Plan Amendments. The public hearing is now called to order. I'm Nancy Hafford, the Chair of the Baltimore County Planning Board, and we will now start our meeting with an account of the members of my board that are present here this evening. When you hear your name, please say aye, and if you're not here, please say absent. Mr. Array.
Aye.
Ms. Brophy.
Aye.
Ms. German.
Absent, no.
Mr. Hafer. Mr. Heckman.
Aye.
Mr. Heinel.
Aye.
Mr. Hinton.
Aye.
Mr. Halipka. Mr. Johnson. Mr. McGinnis.
Aye.
Ms. Panero. Mr. Warren. Ms. Wolfson.
Thanks.
Mr. Perlow.
Here.
How did I miss you? At the June 15th, 2023 meeting of the Planning Board, Mrs. Jeanette Aplazo of the Department of Public Works and Transportation introduced the Cycle 41 Water Supply and Sewer Master Plan amendments to the board. Tonight, Ms. Aplazo is here to further present the amendments to the board. Following her presentation, the board members will have a chance to ask questions, and then members of the public will have an opportunity to speak on the matter. First, please join me in welcoming Ms. Aplazo.
Good afternoon, members of the board, Madam Chair. My name is Jeanette Aplazo. I'm a civil engineer in Department of Public Works in the Sewer Design section. We received one partition cycle for Cycle 41 as shown on the public notice. The public notice was posted in the Jeffersonian and the Daily Record, as well as on DPW&T's website, in compliance with executive order governing the annual amendment process. Here's a review of the current map designations for reference as we go through the petition. Primarily, we're going to be dealing with W1, which is W1 and S1, which is areas that have current service, and W7, S7, no plan. So what you see here is the CP Crane generating station. It is in Middle River. It's outside of the Erdl, but however, it's inside of the metro. The amendment 2301 is located at 1021 Carroll Island Road in Middle River, as I said. The current map designations are W7 and S7, no planned community or multi-use service. The petitioner is requesting changes to to be W1 and S1, existing service areas in the western portion of the petition, and W3 and S3 in the eastern portion, which specifies capital improvement. The petitioner currently has water and sewer service to the existing structures on the parcel in the eastern area. The petitioner is requesting map designation changes due to, quote, substantial changes in the character of the neighborhood and a danger to the public health, end quote. Staff recommendations are as follows. EPS recommends approval of the requested map designation changes with the understanding that any redevelopment of the properties will be required to comply with the critical area requirements. Planning is not recommending, our planning department is not recommending a change to the map designations due to current zoning classifications, a lack of clarity and inappropriate and a lack of appropriate documentation regarding proposed use of the site and the guidance of relevant planning documents. DPW&T is recommendations are for W1 and S1 to be provides to parcels 155, 154, between parcels 155 and 141, and parcels 141. We're recommending a W3 and S3 for capital facilities areas for parcel 154, which is above parcel 155, and parcel 140, part 1, and parcel 140, part 2. That will conclude my presentation. Yes, W3, S3 for parcels 154, which is that parcel, because it's broken up in areas. 154 above, which is above parcel 155. Parcel 140, part 1 of 140, and parcel 140, part 2.
Good evening, Madam Chairman, members of the board. Appreciate you having me here this evening. As some of you who've been on this board, I know there's 2 new members, but last year we were here on this very same issue before with a number of other issues, requesting again a water and sewer amendment. We're not here for development approval. We're not here to change the zoning. We're not here to do any of these other things. We merely want to have public water and sewer. And as it indicates in the report, from DPWT, which the other agencies acknowledge, there is public water and sewer serving the site right now. So specifically, that public water and sewer is being serviced through a private pipe, which is not up to the industry standards. If something is to happen with this site, it would need to be brought up to the public standards. So we are requesting this formal approval. You are not the final arbiter of this. From here, it goes to the council. And from the council, or it goes to the county executive who forwards it to the council. The council then would issue an approval, typically, as they did for everything but this one in the last cycle. And that's why we're back here again today. We pushed off possibly pursuing a lawsuit for it not being forwarded to the state, but the state is ultimately the final arbiter regarding this, and they do so from a planning perspective. So generally speaking, regarding the process in Baltimore County for public water and sewer to get this approval, which is kind of getting the infrastructure approved, is the most important step. Because if you don't have the infrastructure, what's the point of chasing the zoning? Some people see it differently. You should have the zoning. You should have a plan approved. Well, you can't get a plan approved if you don't have the zoning, and if you can't have public water and sewer. If you're in the critical area, such as we are, and in the critical area, we have the IDA designation. I don't want to get into critical area law that came about well after the ERDL and well after the Metropolitan District came into play. But the IDA is the most intense designation, and they did so looking at the property. It's a power plant. The power plant has since been torn down. I don't know about you, but I don't want to drink water out of a former power plant's well water. It just doesn't seem like a very good idea. And also in the critical area, it highly recommends that you cluster development, not have it spread out like the current zoning does. So while ultimately there's going to be a later step, if it ever comes to it, to build something else other than what the underlying zoning permits, you would cluster development in an optimal world, preserve as much of the land as possible, and kind of what we updated from what we previously proposed here is, I'm running out of time before I get into a lot of the things I wanted to talk about, just as the overall process and what have you. But what we're doing here is we've been told that the county has earmarked certain money. If you look at the budget, it says this is money for appropriations for things. It doesn't say appropriations for this project or that. We have it on information allegedly from Councilman Marks, who's the councilman for this district, that he has a certain amount of money that can be allocated towards this project to purchase some of it for a county park, which would be great to connect up to another area. And then also there's some state funding allegedly. And again, those aren't pointed out specifically as line items of what money's going to. And in August, which is of course after where we are now in July, the federal government is potentially coming up with money. So based upon how much money can become up, the administration can come up with from our federal and state partners and from the county government, they are, and as we pointed out in our letter talking about why we're requesting this amendment, there's a good portion of this property that we purchased for a park. There's also a fact that we're moving towards green energy, hence the part of why we've decommissioned a power plant. And with that, because you pumped power into the power grid and put it out into the rest of the county previously, now this is an optimal place in the county, I believe, and perhaps even the community, as I understood it a year ago. I don't know if their position's changed. This would be a great place for a battery storage facility. So we don't suffer brownouts and blackouts like they do in California because we're transitioning to this new green energy. And that zoning, the zoning doesn't allow that use right now, as far as we can tell, but we're interested in seeing whether it can, in fact, we can work around that, which would be the same way. Either you change the zoning, and right now no zoning encompasses or contemplates that you're able to do a battery storage facility. That use is not defined anywhere in the zoning regulations or permitted anywhere. So what is that use? It's going to have to be defined, and it's going to have to be allowed in certain zones, whether it's this zone, some future zone, or what have you. That's all different things. So the main thing is the executive order here charges you with, sets out the process. It's not a codified provision. It's not in the county code. It's not in the zoning regulations, but you deciding water and sewer in a vacuum without looking at zoning, uses, other things. You're just deciding whether, okay, well, here's this site. It's a former power plant. Should it be served? There's a two-part test. Is there a substantial change in the neighborhood? Yes, it's a decommissioned power plant and something's going to happen here. What is it going to be? Is there a danger to public health? There's also properties to the north of us, and these people are on well and septic, and it's poisoning the bay. And the county won't pay to extend the line, but if we do, as Deps pointed out, or EPS, they would be happy to connect off of there and work with DPWT to come up with a project. And my time is up, so I will leave with that. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
I do have a question. So last thing you just referenced was, I think it was Beach Drive and Culture Road.
That's correct.
Is the plan to, if this property gets water and sewer, to also get that community water and sewer?
So, I mean, part of what we're doing, and I don't want to go too far afield of kind of your question, but if we were to develop this property, and we would optimally want to do a cluster of development so more land could be preserved and the environment would be better, that public sewer would run along the road. Where it is now, I think was pointed out in EPS's recommendation, which is a little more detailed than the summary or at the beginning that DPWT provides. And what they said is it's 3,000 some feet away right now. They're not going to pay for a sewer line to come that far and then extend up to here. So if something came to this point, it would not be 3,000 feet. It would be much closer, and they would examine the situation a lot more closely. I would tell you that if there is going to be a park, you probably want to have public facilities, not water and sewer out there. So even if what the community wants and there's money that could go towards it and we're all happy and everybody goes home in winter, which is something that's a fluid situation, water and sewer is not going to move the needle on whether there's more money or not or what happens. I would venture a guess that if you have a public park, you're going to want public water and sewer there as well.
I do. Maybe you just answered the question, but if you're going to do a cluster development on a piece of it, why are you asking for W1 and S1 for all three parcels?
If you could move to, let me just try to, not very, not very, it's right after my letter. I think the next visual exhibit shows, and if you could make it bigger, people could see. There it is. So yeah, the discussion was about the parcels, and I don't think it was very clear from the last exhibit, but from this exhibit, you can see where parcel 154 is, kind of that fish up. That goes up to an existing park now, and there's the property owner, not the county or anybody else, has an easement that can make a trail that goes up to, and I don't know what the other park is. I'm sure somebody in the community could tell you, but it would be this lengthy trail that would connect up two parks and be this wonderful thing. And I think everybody likes the idea, and it would be a wonderful thing, and we're all working towards it. But we don't have all that figured out because we don't have the money. But that's that sliver of 154 as referenced, and 155 is just below it. 154 is there. There's 140 part 1 kind of on the top part of the peninsula, and across is part 2, and that's like an old munitions testing island that I don't think anybody wants to go out there for obvious reasons. And then just below it's 141, which is kind of where the main power plant used to be. So to get water and sewer off there, you kind of have to have all the property entitled. You can't make it disappear or go kind of over in the air or under. It's got to be for the entire property. I don't think that we're necessarily proposing anything in 154 in the top sliver above 155, other than if you wanted water and sewer to have a water fountain there for people walking that long trail at the end of it, it might make sense. So, you know, specifics of how they designate things and why, it just makes sense for the whole property on public water and sewer. Again, water and sewer is not entitling you to be able to do anything. That's purely a function of zoning and development regulations. And this is just infrastructure that we're talking about here today.
True, but we all know what comes next after this. So, okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Our first speaker is Norm Kraus.
There's a couple provisions within the Chesapeake Bay critical area that speaks to extension of boundaries. One of them states that whenever 3/5 of the owners of the record title to lands lying in any locality of the county adjoining the Kent County Metropolitan District, but outside the boundaries thereof, shall be in writing petition to, basically state that we don't want this to be there. I represent my house, which is in Seneca Park. I'd like to, does anyone know on the board what that means? What 3/5 of what? 3/5 of what communities we would have to have for a petition to knock this out? No?
You say not to sell.
No.
To sell?
No, not to, so to remove this amendment from moving forward. It says 3/5, we can't extend boundaries to change the designations for the property.
I would just continue to talk just to make sure that we don't miss anything.
Okay, the only other thing is that I want to, it sounds like that this amendment is based on the precipice of two statements. One is that it was a critical issue with the the septic and the wells, which I can't understand because some of the documents they mentioned 3,000 properties of failing septic systems, but I don't know where that information comes from in the amendment, in the letter that was stated from their camp. And then Talbot County has their own program for helping, that's Amendment 250. So that helps the people change those wells around. And I'm surprised that Baltimore County doesn't have something for their people as well.
If you would like to send something to the planning department and in writing, I can see that you have quite a few pages there. It will be distributed to the board. I can tell you to take a look at it.
Who would I send it to? Okay.
Ms. Spence, I'm right here. She'll give you the information.
Okay, I yield. Thank you.
Thank you for taking the time to come out.
Next up, we have Chris Key.
My name's Chris Key, and I live directly across from where the power plant was. My question is, how can you approve a Cycle 41 when we really don't even know what the concrete plan is? Without a concrete plan, there's no way to know if what Foresight winds up doing will be detrimental to our community. Aside from the terrible traffic problems any development will cause, and traffic is already congested, as people can say that live there. I don't know if you guys are aware, there's a large pier attached to this property. There are metal retaining walls that are crumbling into the water. Now, we think the pier is covered in creosote. And there is no address of these issues. My question is, last we talked with Foresight, they wanted to put 200 homes. What kind of housing is proposed in this prime waterfront location with no water access? These walls are deteriorating. The pier, like I said, creosote. Environmentally, they may be harmful structures. That's a red flag to me, living there right across. Another possible issue that I wanted to bring up is we have a small pumping station for Seneca Park Road. If they do this development, are we supposed to absorb 200 homes into the pumping station? That's never been discussed. There's no plan. I guess in closing, there are many unresolved issues for our community. We can't accept development. And I hope the board acknowledges these issues and votes against any development. Thanks.
Next up, we have Bonnie Jasinski.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'd just like to touch on a couple points because I think everything will be covered with the people we have here. Zoning is this is against what Mr. Vittori was saying, but really zoning is what should drive the use of this property. The petitioner requested a zoning change during the 2020 CZMP process. It was denied by Baltimore County staff, Planning Board, and County Council. Therefore, the existing RC20 and RC5 zoning remains in place. There was also a request to adjust the Erdl line to include the site within the Erdl. This was denied as well, with many comments. I believe this is a backdoor approach to force the county's hand to strengthen their case for a zoning change during the next CZMP, which is coming up in September of 23, that will allow for more residential development and to drive up the value of the property, since we are trying to acquire funding to create as much of the land into a park. I think it's very vague, the uses. Mr. Heckman, thank you very much for questioning. It was a very good question and it needs to be heard. There is consequences to approving this sewer and water extension. I believe it would be premature and would create unintended consequences that would benefit the petitioner. Address some of the traffic issues and public safety. There was a recent county project actually that lasted several days that had traffic backed up for hours at every ingress point. I mentioned the last time we were here. The two peninsulas of Bowley Scooters and Seneca Park had one point of ingress and egress at Carroll Island Road and Bowley Scooters Road. It should be noted that Baltimore County traffic has indicated the above intersection is considered failing. More development on this peninsula, which I think that's what we're headed towards, would only exacerbate this issue. Thank you very much.
Next up, we have Jim Hawk.
Thank you for having us. First thing, CP Crane. When CP Crane was built, it was opposed by the community, but we needed electricity, they said. Part of that agreement was if CP Crane ever was shut down or dismantled, that it would go back to its natural state. Foresight told us they purchased. They didn't purchase. They were given $1.75 million to clean it up and put it back to its natural state, along with what they're doing with recycling. It's zoned RC5, RC20. The first plan came with 400 homes that they want to put in there. One of the people here said it's only allowed 75 under the current zoning. They came back with a 200 plan, 198 to be exact, and 90% of those are townhouses, which is 5.5, which they're not allowed to do, okay, under the current zoning. So thank you for asking that question, because we know what's next. If you allow water and sewer to go into there, then what's going to happen is the development's coming with it, where we can't handle that development because the roads can't handle it, the infrastructure's not there, and the rest of the problems that it's going to create. And what they're doing is forcing our hand because they've already threatened to sue, okay, and sue Councilman Marks. Prior to that, Councilman Bevins, when he received the property, because he didn't purchase it, told him it's a bad deal. You're stuck with something you can't develop. They went ahead with it. That's on them. If they put it back to its natural state, why are we changing it from a natural state back to a development? That's the question there. And to say because septic is not a good thing to go in there, I agree with you on that. But there's no way you could put enough septic and wells to put 200 homes in there. And when we asked them that question, they said, well, if you fight us, we'll sell it to somebody else, and they might not be as nice. So I'm asking you today, please look at this closely. And thank you for your question, because it's not just about the sewer and water, and you're crossing the Erdel. The only time that Erdel is being crossed is when there's a current problem. We're not crossing it to create a problem. And that's what you have to consider. So I appreciate your time.
Next up, we have Nick Spalt. Oh, yeah.
Thank you, Honorable Board, for having me to speak today. I have a few points that are going on what the other speakers have had said already. I want to recognize the Department of Public Works and the Planning Department both have not made a recommendation for parcel 141 to receive W3 and S3. And that's the real critical issue here. It was just said that no, on the county master plan, the plan indicates that sewer extensions outside the Erdel should be for protecting human health and the environment. This amendment for an extension of service does not relate to protecting health and the environment. It would increase the amount of sewer extension to these areas. If there is development, that just doesn't make any sense. So extending sewer to S3, S3 and W3 to this parcel would not protect human health and environment, period. And then page 151 of the current county master plan indicates that extensions indicate a policy for promoting redevelopment and revitalization inside the Erdel. So where should you do redevelopment? Inside the Erdel. And there's no reason to actually extend water and sewer here if there's a proposed sale to the government. Why would you give them W3, S3, and W1, S1 in negotiations? That's only going to drive up the sale price of this property for the county government and the federal government. They said that there would be no tie-ins there, but I would be less likely to sell the property to the government if I had a designation for water and sewer and saying I can put in, houses here because they'll be able to tie into the water and sewer. So I wanted to say, just if there's going to be a proposal for buying this property from the government, then to do this amendment process after that sale happens. BGE, if they have a battery storage facility, they can petition for this amendment. If it's a park and they want water and sewer, they can petition for that amendment. So I just wanted to also show that the draft 2030 master plan shows all of these tax IDs, all the parcels for resource preservation. So if you guys wanted to follow your county master plan, please deny this. Thank you.
And our final speaker is Miss Amy Roush.
Nobody ever gets it right. We're good. Okay, can we go to the next slide? Since we have 2 minutes, I'm going to go fast. My apologies. If the uses are relevant, then why are we even talking about the Erdl and the Metropolitan District line? There's basically 4 assertions in the petition, right? That water and sewer are already present, that the change is supported by policy, that the change would mitigate a health hazard, and that it would benefit the community. I think that Master Plan 2030 disputes all of those, actually. Next slide. In Master Plan 2030, which was approved with amendments on June 29th, they do have this as resource preservation, as you just heard. Next slide. One of the proposed uses is battery storage. This is an example of a battery storage facility in Chesapeake Beach. It's a 1 megawatt facility. I don't know why you would need water or sewer for that, but I have other concerns about battery storage that aren't clear. In the peer-reviewed journal in Energy and Environmental Science, I'll provide you a quote, and I can provide you the reference if you'd like it. An increasing and slightly worrying phenomenon is the incidence of fires and explosions in large lithium-ion battery energy storage systems. Fire extinguishing agents used to mitigate the incidents will be a carrier to all pollutants released that can broaden the area of impact. Within the Chesapeake Bay area, that's concerning. Next slide. You heard a little bit about traffic and the uses as a park. Where that orange cone is on that map is where the recent road construction was, and these are just a few quotes that I randomly pulled from our Facebook community pages to give you a flavor of what we encountered. Next slide. This was the proposed development in 2022. Though they say they don't have a proposal, that's what we last saw. Next slide. Development on that scale would impact our enrollment in our schools. As you can see, Chase Elementary is at 80 to 99.9% enrollment. Next slide. Middle River is expected to exceed its enrollment in 2027. And similarly, on the next slide, Chesapeake High School is also at 80 to 99% without this development. Next slide, the final point. Oh, yep, and projected enrollment doesn't look like redistricting the schools or changing where your child goes to school is going to solve that problem near term in the next 5 years or so. Next slide. Is the public health concern? I would argue that adding additional housing to an already overloaded and fragile system is probably not a good idea. Here you can see that as recently as April 6th, there was an overflow at the Back River wastewater treatment plant, and sewage overflows are an equally concerning health issue. So finally, last slide. In summary, the petition concludes with the justification that there have been substantial changes to the character of the neighborhood and an increased danger to public health. I would argue that the only change to the neighborhood has been for the better with the removal of the hazard of the power plant that was there. And there's no increased danger unless we actually build something else there.
Thank you so very much for your time. I can see you put a lot of effort into this slide together.
Sure. It has been.
Yeah, you have it.
It was emailed earlier today.
Thank you so very much.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Is there any other further questions from the board?
Okay, I have a question for Mr. Doty, but he's gone.
Oh, right here.
Yes, so I have a question for you.
Yes.
You did 2 questions. Why is it that you want to approve today? And then
So the process takes a rather long time, and doing infrastructure, if you're going to build a community, you don't build the houses and then put in the water and sewer. It's an important thing to get the water and sewer in place, one, from this entitlement process, but also when you are going to start doing something. And this process can take, as you know, we were here 1 year ago, and then the state, I think, just recently finally got back to the county about last year's process. So that's It's a rather lengthy process of 1 year from, you file in May. We're here in July, as laid out in the executive order from 1990, that the council could certainly have found time to have codified all this process and done what it did. But that process is at least 1.5 years. And what we're trying to do is save 1.5 years. I get that this perpetually goes on, but to the point of you can just wait and this all makes sense. These people have spent $15 million remediating the site. So whether, and I don't know whether they got the money or it was given or they bought it for whatever they bought it for, or however they got it, they've spent $15 million fixing an environmental catastrophe. And towards that end, I think there's something that it'd be great if the county just gave them back $15 million. We'd walk away right now probably.
You said something earlier. You said, well, you threatened a lawsuit. What do you mean? You got approved.
So about 15 years ago, we were before this board on a separate matter in the first district. And towards that end, there was it ultimately was approved by, well, it was recommended as an approval. It was all due respect to what you guys do, you're making a recommendation. And ultimately, it's the state that approves it. It's not the county executive or it's not the county council. The county council never forwarded it. They did what happened here is they essentially pocket vetoed it. They just took our matter out, forwarded the rest of them on to the state, and the state didn't get to consider our particular matter. How it works in this environment is the planning board conducts the public hearing. It says so in the executive order if you read it. We're going to have a public hearing, and while there's not cross-examining of witnesses and questioning and doing that, this is an opportunity to be heard, whereas the council, you don't really have that opportunity. So that lawsuit went, it ultimately didn't end up being adjudicated by the highest courts. Whatever the reason was, my understanding is that someone ran out of money and they just stopped appealing it. But the circuit court ruled that yes, the council can't do what it did. And they did it again this past go around. But rather than getting embroiled in a whole legal morass, we're coming back because we think 1 year later, we can pick up where we are. Doing that another year later doesn't make any sense. Again, this board voted 11-2 already for exactly what we're here for today. 11-2. That's an overwhelming majority of support. There's 3 new members. That's it on this board. And I understand you can reevaluate your decision, but that is essentially what transpired. I believe your vote was for it as well, Mr. Ray.
So I hear a lot of concern, issues that need to be clarified. There's no tangible plan for this project. And I think that, Madam Chair, I'm going to recommend that we, the board member, set up a site visit, something which we should from time to time consider. Go on site, walk this area, take a look at all this stuff, because pictures, all that stuff, yes, we look at them, but I think that is something over the member here, the motion that we schedule a site visit, we want to look at this property, we remember the police, because they are here for the concern.
So any more questions for me, or I didn't want to stay up here if you didn't have more questions?
I have some comments and some questions. First of all, I attended meetings down that area in Village and so forth. And I just want to tell the community that I'm so impressed with the way you present yourselves. This is a lot of emotion, obviously. And the last time that you were here, and you don't use emotion, you use facts. And that is very impressive and very much appreciated. I don't know what the urgency is here. Why do we have to extend water and sewer now? I think the community's been working together with the developers. I think there's a lot. Peter makes a great point. We should go down there and look at it. I'm familiar with this site because I used to be a voter, frankly, and it was our way home, particularly at night. It's a beautiful area down there. This doesn't need to happen now. What is the urgency that we have to extend water and sewer now? Let's study it some more. We need to find out, is David Marks going to come up with the money? I think there's like $4 million in earmarks from Van Hollen and Clark. So there's money that's there that we don't know for sure will be available for purchasing the property. But I don't know anybody that wouldn't want to see a wonderful, beautiful park. Let's not be, I see, let's not be hasty. And I think we have come. Preserve the land.
Any other questions? Thank you, folks. But any other questions for the board, Mr. Furlow?
Gentleman, I think Mr. House, was it? You mentioned an agreement that was there that said it had to be returned to its natural state. Is that a recorded document? Is it a document you have?
Oh, I believe that's recorded, yes.
You have it?
I don't have it, no.
But understand, you make a comment like that, I want to see it. If it's there, okay, you guys have made your presentation. But if that's the case, some of us might feel differently. And that's what you
Kathy
said.
told me that that was there,
Well,
and I know Kathy's not here anymore, but the other part of that, I'm sure we can find it. And the reason I say that also is because they have to put it back. If they didn't have to put it back to that natural state, why would they be spending the money to do it?
Because they had to remediate. Okay,
Exactly.
so that's been taken care of. Okay, understand.
Has it?
Has it?
And again, the other thing that there's not.
But I'm asking you to provide it. Jason, do you have it?
I don't, I've never heard of such a document, I'm not aware of one, but.
So my point is, we listen, we hear both sides, okay? I'm not speaking, in favor of that, but I want to know that maybe there was something that's not there, and you can't use that as part of your argument. That's what I'm suggesting. So I'd like to see it. You can hire, I'm sure you guys have had attorneys involved with you all that want to run a title search and find this agreement that you think is there, or talk to Kathy, maybe she has it someplace. I just don't want to rely on just testimony. We like to see the facts. We like to see it in paper, whether it's on there, whether we do a site visit or not. I think that's very important. I will say to you, though, you guys come to a meeting once, twice, 3 times a year. We're here every other week pretty much. And as you hear about our county, and I understand all of it, I have parks in my neighborhood. Everybody wants parks, but number one, you need money. Number two, you need to be able to maintain it. It costs money to maintain parks at that point. Number three, we asked 6 months ago, how many lots are available in Baltimore County, our planning department, left to be developed for the future of Baltimore County? You know that number? We do. I'm going to tell you in a minute. It's 4,000 lots. 4,000 lots at 400 to 500 lots a year is less than 6 years of development that our county will have, and then there should be no other road. Do you want your children living in Pennsylvania, your grandchildren, whoever it might be? So we also have to look at it as a county, knowing that we need to have increased tax assessment, not so much tax rates, trying to keep our taxes down. I don't think any of us want what Baltimore City pays, almost double what we have. You have to look at development, and do I want it right up on the bay? No. But when you have a piece of land that maybe the feds are only willing to pay for half of it to be a park, then the other half might need to be developed so that they can get back part of their $15 million. Maybe not all of it. Developers sometimes make money, sometimes they lose money. We approved Sparrows Point here 3 or 4 months ago. It took them 9 years to get to us. 9 years of planning that. And I think that this board, based on our vote, thought it's a very good plan for Sparrows Point, getting rid of a lot of problems that they have, the same ones that you have. I can't deal with the traffic. I'm not going to go to that because we all recognize that traffic is a problem. Drive the 495 Capitol Beltway sometime and you'll see that we're not so bad. But I called Kathy today to say I was running late because I thought it was a 4 o'clock meeting because traffic was stopping me getting into Towson. So we all have that. We all have to accept that that's there. So I hear you all, and I really do want to hear you all. But again, the agreement is very important to me, okay? To see it, to be able to read it, to say that's what they were supposed to do, and then it should say fallow if that's what it says.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Furlow.
But I would like to get it.
Greatly appreciate it if you could locate that document. We'd really be interested in seeing it. Thank you so much for your time. Any other board member have any questions or comments?
I would say the number of lots available in the future is a very movable object. There are many people that die, move out, retire, move to another area. Zoning has changed within certain areas, so that is a very fluid figure. So I don't think we should ever be afraid that it's going to run out of lots in 6 years. That's it.
I would like to say.
And 2023, that meeting will be in person. Do I have a motion to adjourn the public meeting? Second? All in favor? Amen.